Verse 2 through 4. Somebody read? Or y'all me to read?
Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing.
Yes, thank you. I want you to see this now, okay? We understand it says count it all joy, right? But what does he say count all joy? Trials that we go through. Because it produces something in our life. And I want you to see, he says count it all joy, my brothers. He says when. He doesn't say if, right? He doesn't say if you go through trials. He says when you go through trials. Because he's making it clear that trials are going to come in our lives. It's going to happen. Nobody's going to have a perfect life where there's not trials in your life. The difference is how we react to those trials and how we see those trials. And James is saying, see them as joy. Count them as joy. Because God is doing something. Right? He said He's producing in you. When you hit, and He doesn't just say when they are, not if. He says how what? Various. So He's saying there's going to be different trials. You're going to have trials, and they're going to be different trials. But they're coming. And when they do, don't ball up in a fetus position and say, I can't handle this. He says, count it as joy. Those are easy words, ain't it? Is that easy word for you guys? Liars. It's never an easy thing to count something bad as joy. Never. But because God transforms our life, He transforms our mind, right? We went to Romans chapter 12, verse 2. He says, be transformed by what? The renewing of your mind. And the renewing of your mind is what? The way you think. The way you think. Because the way we think affects the what? The things we do. The things we do. If we see it as God is trying to destroy us, what are we going to do? We're going to be mad, we're going to cry, we're going to do all these things. But if we see it that God is trying to build me, He's trying to produce patience within me, He's trying to work in me, then we can handle trials in a different way. Because my way of thinking about trials has changed. And we were just talking, and I was talking about that trials are set forth, or God uses them to strengthen us. That's the purpose of trials, is to help strengthen us. And the way we think about them, we're either going to make a choice to allow them to strengthen us or to allow them to destroy us. We have a choice, right? And it's in the way that we think of them, the way we see that, the way that we are being transformed is through our thinking. And this is what God was doing with Elijah. He was changing his way of thinking. And I think that what he needed to do, and I could be wrong, these guys could disagree, and then they would be wrong. But I think what happens sometimes, even with Elijah, if God would have took him straight from what he was doing to Mount Carmel, it would have brought pride in his life. I could be wrong. It's an assumption on my part, okay? I'm not telling you that that's biblical, straight from the Bible. I just believe it might would have. And I believe sometimes we have to go through a process, because if God took us from here to Mount Carmel, then it would bring pride in our life. And sometimes we have to bring humility in our life. And he was bringing some humility to Elijah right now. He was a great prophet. Even people knew he was a prophet, right? And he had him by himself, and then he had him relying on a widow woman. And he was bringing humility in his life. And that humility of understanding, humility and meekness is not weakness. Do we understand that? And I think sometimes as men, we think that it's weakness, but it's not. It's actually what? Humility and meekness is control power. It's control power. It's not that we're weak. It's just we think rightly of ourselves. That's humility, is to think rightly of yourself. To not think yourself better than another. Right? It's putting yourself in the place it should be. And God was bringing some humility to Elijah because he was wanting to make Elijah what? Fruitful. And we have to understand that God was directing. I'm not going to go as far as saying God is causing. I'm not that deep of a Calvinist. I'm not a hyper-Calvinist and say God's causing. I do lean on the Calvinist side, but I'm not a hyper-Calvinist. Brett is. But anyway, I had to get it on video. But I wouldn't say God was causing it, but I would say God was directing it. He was allowing it for a purpose. He was directing the cutting. He was directing the refining fire in Elijah's life. And I believe in our life that God directs the cutting and He directs the refining fire in our life. And sometimes it doesn't look the way we think it should. It just don't. But we have to just trust God in the work that He's doing in our lives. I think about in the Bible it says what? You are the potter and we are the what? Clay. Right? That's God. He's the potter, we're the clay. He's molding us and He's shaping us into the vessel that He wants us to be. And He uses these things in our life to do that. Has anybody in here did pottery? On a wheel? Have you ever seen it? Okay. So, I did pottery one time. I was in Nicaragua. And they were doing pottery. And he said, "You want to try?" I'm like, "Yeah, I want to try. It looks easy." And they had one of those kick wheels. You had to kick it, get it going. Once it goes to spinning, you put your hand on the clay, you got to pull it up. It's not as easy as it looks. Because if you don't put enough pressure on it, it doesn't move. But if you put too much pressure on it, like I did, it'll sling all over the room. So there's a certain amount of pressure that has to happen, and a certain way you use your hands for that to mold and shape into what you want it to be. And you can take, it depends on how you move your hands, and how much you pull up, and how much you push in, determines what shape it's going to be. And that's God's hands on us. God is not going to just not do anything because we won't move. But God's not trying to put too much on us that we're destroyed. Right? People, I've heard people in the United States, and y'all might not use this out of context, but they will take and say that God will not put more on you than you can handle. Do you believe that's true? No, sir. That is not true. God will put more on you than you can handle. But He will not put more on you than He will help you through. Because if we could handle everything in our life, we would never turn to God and look at Him. Never would. Scripture doesn't say that He won't put more on us than He'll handle. It says that we won't be tempted in a way that He will not give us a way out. And He is the way out. He's it. So, too often we as Christians, we want to say, God would never put nothing hard on me. Why would He not? When do we seek God the most? When do we look at God the most in our lives? Listen, if you got something bad going on in your life, what do you do? You pray, right? And when it's hard, who do you try to lean on? God, right? When you're in that valley, you're looking at God, you're leaning on God, you're trusting God, and you're saying, God, I need you. But when we're on the mountaintop, we say, do. So why would God not put us through things? It's in those times that God truly gets our what? Attention. It's those times that God gets our attention. So sometimes God's just trying to get our attention. He's just trying to change us. He's trying to transform us and getting our attention because of the things that's going on in our life. Because I know personally that I look stronger on God when things are bad. I'll be honest with you. And there are times that I have to check myself that when everything's going good, I'll go through the day sometimes like, well, I guess I need to pray later. Right? But when I'm going through a hard time, there's nobody got to tell me I need to pray. Because I'm steady praying all day long. Looking at God. Say, God, where are you at? Looking for God. So suffering and trials in our life, it produces in our life. And you know what happens is when I go through something hard, and I'm leaning on Christ, and I'm looking for Christ, and I'm praying, and when He sees me through that, what does it do? It makes me stronger the next time. In reality, I believe that if when something was going on in our life, and we had trials and things going on in life, if we could just map out our past that we've lived, if we could just map it out and look at the times that we had trials in our life and seeing where God was faithful, seeing where God was working, that when we became in trials today, we said, shh, this ain't nothing. God doesn't see me through worse. God doesn't see me through. Because He had been doing what? He had been building us the whole time.
Yeah.
He's been strengthening us the whole time. He's been working in our life the whole time. Listen, I can tell you right now, I stand stronger in trials today than I did a month ago. I stand stronger in trials today than I did 5 years ago. And it's because God slowly was cutting at me and refining me. And don't get me wrong, He got a lot more cutting to do in my life. I know He does. But are we willing? See, when we have something physically wrong with us, we're willing to lay down and allow somebody to take a knife to us. But spiritually, we run away from it. Does that make sense? Spiritually, we need to lay down and say, God, I know there's some things that need to be worked on. God, I know there's some things that got to be cut out of my life. And you know what those things are. Just like I know what those things are. But are we willing to lay down and say, God, remove these. Take them away. We so often will pray that prayer, but we don't really mean it. Because when God starts that process, we say, please stop. Right? When He begins to cut, we say, please stop.